Hey everyone, I just want to do a quick intro since this is my first video. If you don't know me or not familiar with my work, my name is Yossi Goslin, and I used to write for Hoops Hype and some of the other sports websites owned by USA Today, mainly about the NBA salary cap, transactions, that type of stuff. And this is my YouTube channel. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. I haven't put out any content for a while, and now I'm back, and this is what I wanted to do. And the first thing I want to talk about is the Denver Nuggets, who I can't believe what I just saw, but man, they're still pretty damn good, and I don't think that their window's over by any means. And as long as they continue to be a legit contender, they're gonna run this back. So their off season, their plan for the next few years, it would seem pretty cut and dry. Bring back everybody at all costs. And while that is seems like a pretty simplified way to go about things, especially under the old CBA, you just spend as much as you want to keep the window going. Now it's a little more complicated. In the new CBA, you've got a couple other more restrictions. It makes it a lot harder to upgrade the roster on the back end. And even though the Nuggets are pretty much already resigned to the idea that, yeah, they're going to be taxpayers over the next few years, and I'm sure they don't mind spending whatever it takes to keep this group alive, there are other penalties now that go beyond financial penalties and could really affect their long-term planning. So I wanted to go over why the Nuggets, I think, should be a little more careful in their long-term planning, particularly why they should avoid the newly implemented second apron. Go over some contract scenarios for some of their key players coming up, mainly Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and just kind of project what their payroll could look like over the next 2 years while accomplishing those goals. So this is the Nuggets payroll so far heading into next season. Not 100% official. They still need to see what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope does with his player option. I think he's going to opt out. They got Reggie Jackson's as well. But for the most part, it's pretty much set. It's so far projected at just over 190 million, which would put their tax payment just under 50 million. And they are now projected to be over both apron levels. And some of the restrictions, mostly with trade, is they cannot take back more salaries in a trade than they're sending out. That's for teams above the first apron. And teams above the second apron cannot aggregate players, meaning they can't combine multiple players. If they wanted to trade Zeke Naji or Reggie Jackson for like a $13 million player, they're not allowed to do that. But that's not even the concern in regards to the apron levels, because the roster is pretty much 95% set going forward. The bigger concern is the penalties to draft picks, because teams that finish over the second apron have their draft pick 7 years out frozen. So if they finish over the second apron in this upcoming season, they can trade their 2032 first round pick. And that's kind of a problem for the Nuggets, because if you don't remember, they last offseason they traded, I believe, their 29 or 2030 first round pick to the Thunder in a deal that got them multiple present picks. I think they got the pick that became Julian Strother, and they got a couple other second round picks. And that's important for fielding the back end of the roster with such an expensive payroll at the top. The other thing is it is possible for that draft pick to become tradable again if they stay out of the second apron in 3 or 4 seasons. However, if they still are over the second apron for multiple seasons, then that same frozen draft pick then gets dropped to the end of the first round. So even if they do end up having that first round pick tradable again, now it's devalued because it got dropped. So generally speaking, if you have the opportunity to avoid the second apron, you just got to do it. So the first order of business is figuring out the future for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He has that $15 million player option, which he could pick up and extend off of that. However, given how good he is and how well he could fit on so many other teams, he's got a pretty big market. So I think it would make more sense for him to capitalize now and try to secure a long-term deal with the Nuggets. Now, this projection I made isn't something I necessarily think is gonna be exactly what he gets, but this is just a type of structure I think the Nuggets should try to go for, because a lot of the teams that would want him probably don't even have the means to top what the Nuggets can offer him, because they could pay him whatever. They've got his bird rights. And there's very few cap space teams out there that I think would really make an aggressive bid at him. Maybe the Sixers, if they strike out on all their other targets ahead of him, maybe give him like a front loaded short term offer. But since the Nuggets have the length advantage, they can give him up to 5 years. This is a type of structure I could see them coming to terms with in the end. And let's say he wants like a 5 year deal in the $80 million range. Try to give him try to front load it, try to make it a descending structure. They started out at a higher amount than he was supposed to make this season, and it ages really well, helps the Nuggets with their apron goals over the next few seasons. And now extensions, and first and foremost is Jamal Murray. He is on the last year of the max contract that he signed with the Nuggets back in 2019, which I thought was kind of a lot at the time, but he has met the value of it. He's been a max level player, at least in the playoffs. One of the greatest regular season to playoff elevated performers, maybe in NBA history. And he's going to get a max deal from the Nuggets. He sealed it after helping them win a title last year. And he's going to be eligible this season for up to 4 years, 208.5 million. He could have extended for 3 years last year, but didn't. He wanted to try to qualify for All NBA this year, which could have helped him qualify for the Supermax, which would have been a much higher maximum salary amount, but he didn't qualify. So the Nuggets will present him this offer, and it's going to be up to him to decide if he wants to take it, or maybe he wants to hit free agency instead so he can resign with the Nuggets and add a 5th year, which would be at roughly 61 million. But in all likelihood, however he chooses to go about this max contract, this will most likely be a salary structure with the Nuggets over the next 4 to 5 years. And then we got Aaron Gordon. He is set to make 22.8 million this year and has a player option for the same amount for the following season. So far, that extension that he's currently on has been an amazing deal. He's certainly exceeded the value of it, and he's definitely due for a raise of some sort. And he is going to be extension eligible this offseason for up to 4 years, 150 million, where he would decline that player option amount, start at a higher amount. So that would put him at around 37 million a year, which would be a pretty massive annual salary for one of the top starting but sub all-star level forwards. So if he hits the open market, he will definitely get some massive offers since his skill set will translate really well for most teams. However, he's not going to find a better situation than Denver and playing with Nikola Jokic. So maybe there's a compromise that both sides can make. So here's a projection I came up with where he would make 4 for 120. 30 million per year could be undervaluing him going forward, considering the rising cap environment, and he probably would be leaving some money on the table. But at the same time, he would be making more than he's ever made, and it would help the Nuggets tremendously going forward. So now I want to put all these projections together to show how the Nuggets could potentially avoid the second apron in both this upcoming season and the following one. So the biggest difference is I've got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's got a slightly higher amount for this season than his player option. And with all this together, they are roughly 6 million above the second apron, and they could easily get below with a Zeke Naji salary dump, or they can trade Reggie Jackson with a minimum salary and stay below the second apron after getting back the 14 players later. And as for next season, the salary cap is expected to rise by 10% in subsequent seasons. So we already have a pretty good idea of where the apron level should roughly land at. So I put all these projections together with Jamal Murray making his max contract, that extension amount I gave out for Aaron Gordon, that contract I gave out for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They get to 14 players with draft picks mostly. And the biggest difference is that I excluded Zeke Naji because salary dumping him would help the Nuggets stay below the second apron in both seasons. So with all things put together, they would have a pretty not so crazy luxury tax payment, and they're able to fill the roster while staying below the second apron level. Could be a little bit wishful thinking to think that they can get everything working out quite this way, that every player is going to agree to help the Nuggets out with certain types of team-friendly structures. But just to put it out there that, yeah, there is sort of a template that the Nuggets could do to potentially avoid the second apron. Now, it wouldn't be a disaster for them if they end up finishing the second apron once, even twice. But I think that they'll very likely re-sign all their guys. If they go over the second apron, so be it. They'll try to do their best to avoid it over the next few seasons. But I think there's a very good chance that they'll be able to position themselves to potentially get below it later. Even though their season ended earlier than many of us expected, I do think they got a lot of quality depth from their bench. And overall, I think it's a good strategy to continue drafting more players to support the bench, especially with the new CBA and all these restrictions. It's a really good way to field the back end of the roster. I'm sure the Nuggets will continue to be a legit contender over the next few years. And as long as they do keep hitting on some more draft picks, hopefully some more of their recent draft picks that they got last year hit, they'll be in really good shape going forward.